I would say Mavazes Hamoed. This is Mishnah Pirkei Avos and Mavazes. Two, someone is Mavazes Chol Hamoed. So not treating Chol Hamoed properly is a very chomer Indian, and we'll see how Chazal protected the kedusha of Chol Hamoed in different ways. Now the obviously there's many Chol Hamoed because Shabbos is one thing. Most people have a business that's set up, or many businesses don't operate on the weekends anyway, and it's understood in the Welt already that Saturday is a quiet day. So working at Shabbos, unless you're like in a retail in a mall or like in a nursing home or something that like is constant, working at Shabbos is not as complicated. Working at Yom Tif is a little more complicated, but it's minimal amount of time. But if you're going to have to do twice a year, a whole week off of your whole business, it's a little more complicated. So we have to understand, based on the parameters of Chol Hamoed, how do you run a business on Chol Hamoed? How do you keep a business open? How do you have employees working in? And then, B'chlal, what about your own stuff? Your own inyanim. I remember one of a very good shaila, which touches on a lot of sugyas, was the typical scenario where there's a visitor here for Yom Tif, a vacationer, here for Yom Tif, and they're so taken by the neighborhood. It's unbelievable, this place. So they call up the broker and they say, "Show me around some houses." That's it. I'm in the mood. I want to buy a house here. So the broker feels like that they're not going to have this buyer any time after Chol Hamoed. Because once they go home, they're already like they're done. They're not in the mood anymore. Right now, in the mood. Now I could get a deal with the person. The shop for the homeowner. All the different levels. Is a lot of understanding why deraisa, is it derabanan? Where does it come from? And b'chlal, we know that there's something, that there's levels of isurei malacha. For example, Shabbos, you're not allowed to do anything. Yom Tif, it's still aser, but you could cook. So it's confusing because is it mutter or is it aser, right? Make up your mind. But no, it's not like that. I remember one time I was by my sister's house, and for Yom Tif, and I don't know, I went to an earlier minyan or something so I could come home, and went back to her house to learn afterwards. So it was quiet. There's nobody in the house. It was basically just me in the house, and there was a cleaning lady there. I was actually in the sukkah, just in case for yichud purposes. But anyway, so I was in the house, and then I walk in, and the cleaning lady is doing laundry on Yom Tif. It's not my sister's type to have her husband's a rav, like to have her cleaning and do laundry on Yom Tif. This is weird. So I asked the cleaner. I said, "My sister says he should ask you to do laundry." It's my sister. I'm allowed to mission, even if it's not my business. So she asked you to do laundry. She said no, but I'm allowed to do laundry today. So what do you mean? He's like, "Oh, I don't know. There's a problem. My sister's cooking. I think I can do laundry." So it's like there's everything. There's levels in things. There's Isra Malach of Shabbos. There's Malach of Yom Tif. Now Chol Hamoed, we know that there's a lot more things that are mutter. But does that mean that everything is mutter? What does that mean exactly? So the background to the whole sugya is a sugya in Chagiga. Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph. I gave out some of the papers. We're not going to learn the whole Gemara, but we'll learn the first Gemara and the last Gemara. The Gemara says, the Tanur Rabbanan, es Chag HaMatzah Vas Yomim. You should be shomer Chag HaMatzah is 7 days. Limeid al Choyloi Shel Moyed She'asar B'Asiyas Malacha Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says, it's a pasuk. It says, keep Pesach for 7 days. Now, it doesn't mean eat matzah because it says tishmar. Tishmar means guard it from Asiyas Malacha. So it means tishmar, guard it. So it means you're not allowed to do malacha all 7 days. It's a kavachomer. If I care, there's more reason to ask Chol Hamoed than to ask Yom Tif. The first and seventh day of Yom Tov are not surrounded by Yom Tov. But Chol Hamoed is part of the Yom Tov. It's bookends on either end, so it's mamish part of the Yom Tov. It's sandwiched between 2 days that are Yom Tov. That's a svara to say that Chol Hamoed should be Yom Tov dik. Okay, so the Gemara goes back and forth. The Maskana of the Gemara is the last thin line over here, Tanya Idach. Tanya Idach. I marked it off, it's the last in line. Tanya Idach. Sheishes Yomim Toichal Matzos. You should eat matzos for 6 days. Uvayoyim Hashvi, and on the 7th, Atzeres. So Mashvi connects the 7th day to the 6 days. Mashvi, Atzor, just like on the 7th day, you should stop. Av Sheishes Yomim Atzurin, so to the 6 days you should stop. So if you're not going to do malach on the 7th, you shouldn't do malach on the 6th. Maybe you'll say, well, if you're not allowed to do malach on all 7, maybe all 6 you shouldn't do any malach at all. So there's this funny relationship. On the one hand, we're saying that the 6 days are like the 7th. But on the other hand, we're saying the 7th is special. So are the 6 like the 7 or the 7th special? Which one is it? So it says the Gemara, the answer is, the 7th has a din atzar b'chol malacha. Don't do any malacha at all. Ve'ein shisha atzurin b'chol malacha. And the 6th have an isser malacha, but not from all malacha. So that's the relationship. The 7th is usher in everything. The other 6 are like the 7th. They're not allowed to do everything, but you're not allowed to be usher in everything. So how do you know what to say? Haloi masan akasav ela lachachamim loy malach eze yoyim as. So this is an interesting idea. Now, it's an isser deraisa. There's an Isser De'araisa, but according to the Gemara, the simple reading, there's an Isser De'araisa, it's not cut, but that could be in the De'araisa. Okay? All back forth in Tosfos, exactly what's going on, and it ends up being a big machlokes Rishonim and what the maskana of the Gemara is. Is the maskana of the Gemara there's Midiraisa, everything is mutter, but Midirabanan, we ask at certain things, or Midiraisa itself, there's room from Heter and room from Isser, and the Chachamim decided what it was. So what are the parameters that Chachamim gave? The Chacham gave the following parameters, basically, that you're allowed to do Malacha on Chol Hamoed when it's for Tzorech HaYom Tov, if it's needed for the Yom Tov. So you're allowed to go buy things that you need for second day of Yom Tov, candles, things like that. You need things for the second days. Anything which is Tzarech Yom Tov or for Tzarech of Chol Hamoed, you're allowed to do. And you're allowed to do anything which is a Davar Ha'aved. Davar Ha'aved means you're going to lose money if you don't do it. Now, when we get further along into the idea of working on Chol Hamoed and business on Chol Hamoed, just keep in mind, obviously, Chazal know that if you're not going to work, you're not going to make money. Right? They're assuming that if you're working, you're making money. And if you're not working, if you're not making money at your work, so then it's a different problem. So you're obviously, the assumption is when you work, you make money. And if Chazal say don't work, then the assumption is you're not making money. So they're not making money is not called the davar of it. That's obviously understood to be that if you're not making money, that's not called davar. Davar of it means you're going to be losing from the Karen. You're going to lose something specific. You're going to be losing if you don't work. And we'll see exactly what that means in the context of business. Upon Davar Ha'aved and Tzarech Hamoed are the two heterim. The Davar Ha'aved and it's a Davar Tzarech Hamoed. You're not allowed to do a Ma'aseh Uman. You're not allowed to do it in a way which is a Chachma and a professional to do it. And that's the rule. Now, what's the maskana of the Gemara of the Poskim? Is it De'araisa or is it De'Rabbanan? Now you'll say, what's the difference if it's De'araisa and De'Rabbanan? Not that much of a difference, honestly. But first of all, you know, there's a major nafkamina, which is in the case of a suffix. There's a question: do I need it for Yom Tov? Do I not need it for Yom Tov? I may need it for Yom Tov. I'm not sure if I need it for Yom Tov. Right? If I is it a davar of it? Is it not a davar of it? I may be losing money. Now, a suffix davar of it could be considered a davar of it. The possibility to lose money could be called the davar of it, but I don't even know exactly if I'll lose money or not. It's possible that it will reimburse itself. I may not end up losing anything. So, is it deraisa derabanan? So on the next page, we have over here the Shulchan Aruch. Here's the Shulchan Aruch Paskin, and we'll see the Rambam. The Shulchan Aruch Paskin is like this. It says Chol Hamoed Aser b'miktsas malachos u'mutar b'miktasan. It's also in some. Now, he doesn't expound. And in the Beis Yosef, there's a big stira. In the Beis Yosef, there's a big stira if he holds the Deraisa D'Rabbanan. So the Pashtus in the Mechaber, we don't know the Vilna Gaon is Mesupik. He's not clear. But the Ramah says something interesting. He says, "Lafit tzarech ha'inyan shahaya nira l'chachamim lahatir." That whatever the Chachamim felt was needed to be matir, that's what they were matir. So the Magen Avraham is medayik from the Ramah. Why does he say the Chachamim made things mutter according to what they felt was needed? He should have said they made things aser according to what they felt was needed. So the Magen Avraham says, you see from the Ramah, that the Ramah must hold Malachas Chol Hamoed is deraisa. Because the point is that really you start off, everything's aser. And the Chachamim were matir k'fiat tzarech. So the Ramah seems to be clear, it's deraisa, and the Mechaber. What? Because, like we said, because midaraisa they have permission to modify exactly what the gather of the Isser Malach is. It's not the same as Yom Tov. So it's not the same as Yom Tov. Now, what is it? So Chacham understood that the Torah would want.
The Torah left it vague for that reason.
Now, once we get to the Rambam, maybe we'll have an explanation why those things are mutter. But Tzarech HaMoed should be obvious why it's mutter, because just like Oichel Nefesh is you need it to eat, so even if it's not for food purposes, you need it for something else in Yom Tov, right? You need something sewn for a beged. So you need it for Yom Tov because you need that suit or whatever. So Tzarech HaMoed is understood to be part of Yom Tov. Why? Davar Ovid we have to figure out still.
But when it says B'kol, Malacha, it doesn't really mean B'kol Malacha, right? It's not like Shabbos. It's already a lowered form.
Right. Well.
Restriction.
Okay. So
to now attach the Kol Hamoed and say, well, it's bookending. It's already bookending a lower, bookended by.
Well. What's lower about it? Is the whole concept of which malachas are mutter, which malachas are aser, or is it just that there's more heterim? Meaning to say, let's say you have a case. This is a very, very important principle, which I'm just going to throw out the question based on what your comment now. Okay. Let's say you have a case where there's no tzarech hamoed, and it's not a davar avid. However, the malacha seems to be very minimal in general. Okay, so it's not a tircha. It's not a tircha. It's not a big deal. So, are you allowed to do that malacha? For example, zakta chazon ish. Are you mechuyev to check your pockets on Chol Hamoed before you go outside if there's no erev? You live in a place there's no erev. Are you allowed to carry? I have some tissues in my pocket. I don't know. It's not a tzarech hamoed. It's not a davar avid. So do I have a heter to do that? So you're saying, the whole concept is not the same as Shabbos. It's not the malachas of Shabbos, really. So, or do you say, no, the malachas are exact same thing as Shabbos. It's just you have a heter for tzarech hamoed. You have a tzarech hamoed heter, and you have davar avid heter. But if you don't have that heter, you go into a room, and I don't know, your habit is you turn off the lights. Even though to get a davar avid out of LED lights, you have to be on for like 35 years.
Well, like popping some cookies into the oven that are already, like the dough is there for use after, right? So there would be an example. You don't need it for the hog, right? So
right? Something which is not tirch at all. So Chazon Ish discusses what about striking a match. Kids are looking for an activity on Chol Hamoed.
That's getting ready for lunch. For your Shalmi kids, that's already
right.
That's omen.
Right. I'd say Chol Hamoed Pesach, right? They're getting their wood for like, well, it could be Chol Hamoed Sukkot also, right? But so asking really is that even if you say on a deraisa level, you need a heter. You need a heter. But is the whole concept of the malacha the same? Are we talking about the malachas of Shabbos across the board? You're not allowed to go turn on a light switch. You're not allowed to go carry. You're not allowed to go light a match. And you're by Yom Tov mamish, but if now, before we get to the next Mishnah Berurah, is an unbelievable thing. I want to look in the Rambam. Rambam is the next page, because this gives a little context to the whole purpose of what's going on here. So the Rambam says as follows: Choyloi shel moyed, af al pi sheloi nemar boi shabbosin. Even though it doesn't say the word shabbosin. Shabbosin means shvois, rest. Don't do malacha. It doesn't use that word. Hoyel v'nikra mikra kodesh, but it's called part of the mikra kodesh. Mikra kodesh are the days that we call out to be holy. So it's part of the 7-day mikra kodesh. They're called out in the Torah to be holy, but there's not Shabbos and there's chiyuv to rest on them. Harehu's man chagiga b'mikdash. You used to bring korbanos to the Yom Tov on that day. Aser b'asiyas malacha. It's aser in malacha. Kedei. Now there gives a reason. Shelo yek shayi me'achol she'en me'em kedusha klal. So it shouldn't look like Yom, like weekday, and end up being that there's no kedusha to it, and it's just another weekday. But if you do a malacha, you get the rabbanon dekamalkes because that's what the rabbanon. So this Rambam is very hard to read because you start off the top of the Rambam said like it was an Issa Deraisa because the Rambam said it's Mikra Kodesh. It's not Shavuot Muslim, it's Mikra Kodesh, and the Chazal and the Torah asks malacha, so it shouldn't be like weekday. You don't want to make it like weekday. So it's got to have a distinction. Then the Rambam says, oh, by the way, the Isra Malach is Darabana. So there's a Darabana Deraisa. It's very hard to read this Rambam. It's a steer in Rambam. Is it Deraisa Darabanan? He says clearly it's Darabanan, but then in the beginning of the Rambam it sounded like it was a Deraisa. So it's a beautiful concept that's brought down in the Sefer Mishnas Yavitz. What, your uncle? Someone? Whatever. So the Mishnas Yavitz says an unbelievable yisoid. And to explain this yisoid, I want to say over a yisoid that I said over a different time from the Ramban and the Chassam Sofer, the Ritva, and others. I think we said it when we were talking about scooters on Shabbos that year. But anyway, that there's many concepts that are durabanan on Shabbos. Let's say doing business on Shabbos, talking about business. What's that? Davar davar. Right? You're not allowed to talk to someone about business on Shabbos. You're not allowed to open a store and buy and sell on Shabbos. But those are all derabbanans. It's not 39 malachas. So Chassam Sofer wants, what happens if you have somebody that opens their store on Shabbos, they go into their store, they open their store on Shabbos, but they do no malacha. They don't write, they don't do anything. Okay, so they weren't machal Shabbos technically. Because they did no malacha. They only did derabbanans. Zok the Chassam Sofer, and it's based on a Ramban, and based on a Ritva, it brings the Ramban, that he says, the Durabanans are for somebody that's keeping Shabbos, and by him a Shabbos is different than weekday. So he's sitting in Shul, he's wearing his suit and tie, he's listening to laning, and being Gavra Legavra, so Nishtaf Shabbos Gret, how much are you selling it for, right? So that guy it's an Issa Durabanan, but what happens if the conglomerate of all these derabbanans together come out that based on that, by him Shabbos is the same as weekday. Because right now he's opening his store on Shabbos. So there's no difference between Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for him. So he says this guy was Machal Shabbos on a Deraisa level. Because now he took all the derabbanans together and now they catapult him into Machal Shabbos Deraisa. Because he now converted Shabbos into weekday.
Despite his hecker of not doing any malacha.
Yeah,
well, again,
because the Bible said,
didn't do malacha.
But he's sitting in his store and he's treating him. So he says halacha l'maisa. He has the din of machal Shabbos midiraisa. This guy, the shaila was because what happens if he's the shaychet in the city and the Chassam Sofer says it's a nevela midiraisa, not a nevela derabbanan. Even though he never did a single malacha, even though he didn't do malacha, because the isser is Shabbosin. He's over the din of Shabbosim because by him Shabbos is weekday. So he turned Shabbos into weekday. So it's one thing if the guy, so he's basically having Shabbos. So where is it Darabanan? It's Darabanan if you do one of them. You do, but basically you have Shabbos. But if they all the Darabanans together, says the Ramban, imagine if you open up this, he says, he just basically said, before the Chachamim came around, would it be mistaber that you could have every Yid in Klal Yisrael sitting out in the shuk? They're sitting out in the shuk with a good Erev, obviously. And they're sitting out in the shuk, and everyone has their stores open because they brought their stuff there before. And everyone's making deals the whole Shabbos. They go in, they chap a shachris, they chap a musaf, and they do this and whatever. And everyone's buying and selling and doing it. Before the Chacham came around, that was mutter. There was never a single Chacham in the world that was Asur min Torah, because that's not Shabbos. That's what the Ramban says. So the Chassam Sofer bases himself on the Ramban and says that the Rabbanans were to aser individual acts. But if all around the guy doesn't have Shabbos, then he's Machal Shabbos Midiraisa. This is some Sefer is Masber Halach L'Maisa Al Gabi HaShoichet. He says a Shoichet who's Machal Shabbos Midaraisa, then it's nevela. It's not good shchita. So a guy that does this is also not good shchita. Min Torah.
You said this by Shiloh using an electric car to pick you up, take you to Shul.
Yeah, you could use. Yeah, I'm saying whatever. There's a lot of examples, but I got in trouble now. Let's stay. Stick to one thing at a time.
You're amongst the crowd.
Yeah. So
the recording.
Yeah. So now says the Mishnah Siayvitz that's pshat in his Rambam also Lagabe Chol Hamoed. Beautiful pshat in the Rambam. The answer is Mamish reads like it fits in perfectly. The Rambam is saying that each individual malacha is derabanan. Chazal, the Torah didn't answer specific malachas at all, but there is a deraisa concept of Chol Hamoed. The deraisa concept of Chol Hamoed is that it has to be Mikra Kodesh, which means you have to call it out as a holy day. It cannot look like weekday. If you, by doing all your malacha on Chol Hamoed and tiptoeing around and everything, and now you've converted Chol Hamoed to being just like another weekday, that's an echil deraisa of Chol Hamoed. Now you read the Rambam, this is what the Rambam is saying. Chol Hamoed midaraisa, aval pishla nemer b'shabbasan, but Mikra Kodesh, it's called Mikra Kodesh. Ve'arei uzman chagiga b'mikdash. Also, asiyas malacha, even in the Torah. It's also to treat kidei shelo yeh k'shayim moisachol shem mem kedusha makinoy semak. That's only the Rabbanan. So each individual malacha is the Rabbanan, but the concept of turning supposed to be Mikra Kodesh.
I did exactly that when I was a kid, and I think many do it today.
I don't know if you bring a riot from what people so fortunately did a lot of things.
Except for chometz, sukkah.
Mashadari.
And you explain the one you like that?
I had the Rambam passing like that mandala. That's now, based on this, Bura adds a very gishmak shaila in this. There's a Shartzian Dal concept. So, how did that? Like you're asking a little bit. How did that play out on the deraisa in the Rambam's world? In the Rambam's world, if there was always some malacha midaraisa, but there was a Mikra Kodesh midaraisa, so what is that? How did that look like? What did that? How did that manifest itself? So he says, the Shartzian, that there's two main areas that come from Mikra Kodesh. One is your clothing, and one is your sudas on Shabbos, your suudas. So he says that the Gabi clothing. So according to the Rambam, according to this whole explanation, wear weekday clothing on Chol Hamoed. Yes, but it doesn't have to be Shabbos clothes. It doesn't have to be Yom Tov, but it shouldn't be weekday clothes. So Bezeh, Nisyashvu, all the high school girls, all the girls on the planet, they come and say, I have nothing to wear Chol Hamoed. When you have nothing to wear Chol Hamoed, you have a closet full of clothes for Shabbos, for Yom Tov, and weekday, Sunday, can't. No, Chol Hamoed is a whole nother thing. You need like Chol Hamoed category, right? So I'm like, what's going on over here? And no, it's a mefurish Shartzian. Don't I'm not sure what you want to do with this, but this recording you should for sure turn off. It can get expensive. But I'm saying, L'maisa, Mikra Kodesh of Chol Hamoed is a middle level. It's not the Mikra Kodesh of Yom Tif, but it is a level of Mikra Kodesh that the Rambam is saying is a deraisa concept that there's a Mikra Kodesh, which is a little bit of a diluted Mikra Kodesh, but you cannot turn it to weekday. But it doesn't have to be like Yom Tif.
Would it be a bizayin to Yom Tov if you wore your big day Yom Tov?
I don't think it's a bizayin to Yom Tif. I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. Chassidim wear their streimels on Chol Hamoed, right? So I don't think it's a bizayin to Yom Tif. I don't think it's a bizayin to Yom Tif. But he's saying you're mechuyev to wear